The first lie wasn't that my best friend stole my business. It was when he looked me in the eye, smiled, and said, "No matter how big we get, we'll build this together." 9 months later, I was sitting in my pickup truck outside the office we had dreamed about for years, watching employees walk into a company built on my ideas, while security escorted me off the property. I remember staring at the glass entrance, wondering how someone I'd trusted like a brother had managed to erase me from my own story. What I didn't know then was that 6 months later, his biggest client would make one phone call that changed everything. But by then, the damage was already done. If you enjoy real stories about betrayal, justice, and karma that feels earned, not forced, please take a second to like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications. It really helps the channel. Now let me tell you what happened. My name is Daniel Carter. I'm 43 years old, and until all this happened, I lived what most people would call an ordinary life in Columbus, Ohio. I wasn't rich. I wasn't particularly ambitious in the flashy, Silicon Valley kind of way. I just liked solving problems. For nearly 18 years, I worked as an operations manager for a regional logistics company. My job wasn't glamorous, but it taught me how warehouses, trucking routes, inventory systems, and supply chains actually worked. Most people never think about how the things they order online magically arrive at their doorstep. I did. Every single day. My wife, Emily, used to joke that I couldn't walk into a grocery store without mentally redesigning how they stocked their shelves. She wasn't wrong. I'd stand there looking at pallets in the back room instead of shopping. Our daughter, Lily, rolled her eyes every time. "Dad's optimizing again." It became a family joke. Life wasn't exciting. It was stable. And honestly, I love that. Then COVID happened. Like millions of other people, everything around us changed almost overnight. Supply chains collapsed. Warehouses couldn't keep up. Companies were losing thousands of dollars every week because nobody had a clear picture of where products actually were. For someone like me, it was impossible not to notice the same problems happening over and over. Different companies. Same mistakes. Spreadsheets that didn't communicate. Employees manually updating inventory. Managers making decisions based on yesterday's information. Every night after work, I'd sit at my kitchen table with a notebook. Emily would bring me coffee around 10. "You still thinking about your warehouse software? I think it could work. You've been saying that for 6 months. I know. So what's stopping you?" I never had a good answer. Fear, mostly. Not fear of failing. Fear of risking the life we'd built. Mortgage. College savings. Health insurance. Those things become a lot more important when you're in your 40s than when you're 23. Starting over isn't romantic. It's terrifying. There was only one person outside my family who knew everything about the idea. Ethan Brooks. We'd been friends for almost 25 years. College roommates. Best man at each other's weddings. Fishing trips. Fantasy football. Birthdays. Funerals. The kind of friendship where people stop saying friend. They just call you brothers. Ethan had always been different from me. Where I was quiet. He could walk into any room and own it within 5 minutes. He knew everybody. Everybody liked him. He had spent years in software sales and had a talent I never possessed. He could sell almost anything. Including himself. It was one of the reasons I trusted him. If I could build the product, he could get people to buy it. At least that's what I believed. One Saturday afternoon, we sat on his back deck drinking beer while our kids played basketball in the driveway. I brought my notebook. Not because I planned to. Because he asked. "You've been hiding something," he laughed. I know that look. I slid the notebook across the table. "Don't laugh." He opened it. Started flipping pages. Flowcharts. Pricing models. Warehouse diagrams. feature lists, profit projections. He didn't say anything for almost 15 minutes. Finally he looked up. This, he tapped the notebook, is actually good. I laughed. Thanks. No. He leaned forward. I'm serious. You really think so? I think you're sitting on something companies would pay a fortune for. My heart actually sped up. Nobody had ever said that before. Emily believed in me because she loved me. Ethan believed because business was literally his profession. That felt different. More real. He closed the notebook. We should build it. I blinked. We? You know operations. I know software buyers. You've got the product. I've got the connections. Then he smiled. The timing couldn't be better. For weeks, we met almost every evening. Coffee shops. My garage. His basement. Sometimes until 1 in the morning. I built workflows. He built pitch decks. I researched warehouse automation. He researched investors. It felt right. Like every skill we had somehow completed the other. Emily loved seeing me excited again. I haven't seen you smile like this in years. I hugged her. I think this could actually happen. She smiled back. I know. Then she said something I would remember much later. Just promise me one thing. What? Get everything in writing. I laughed. It's Ethan. I know. So? We've known each other 25 years. She looked at me carefully. Business changes people. I kissed her forehead. Not him. She didn't argue. She just nodded. Sometimes silence is the loudest warning you'll ever ignore. About 3 months later, Ethan introduced me to a freelance software architect named Raj. We spent nearly every weekend designing the first version of the platform. Money was tight. So instead of hiring a full development company, we pieced together a small remote team. A developer in Texas. A designer in Oregon. A database specialist in Toronto. Everyone worked part-time. Every dollar mattered. I emptied nearly all of the savings I'd built over 12 years. $48,000. Emily knew exactly how much. She also knew what it meant. If this doesn't work. She didn't finish. She didn't have to. I knew. The first prototype wasn't pretty. Actually, it looked awful. Gray screens. Basic buttons. No animations. But it worked. Warehouses could finally track inventory in real time across multiple locations. Orders updated instantly. Managers could see delays before they became disasters. The software solved real problems. That mattered more than appearances. When Ethan saw the demo, he actually stood up. Danny. He laughed. Holy. This is real. It works. He slapped my shoulder. We're going to change our lives. I believed him. Completely. Our first client almost didn't happen. A regional food distributor agreed to test the software for 90 days. It wasn't a huge contract. Only $35,000. But to us, it felt like winning the lottery. The owner, Frank, spent 2 hours walking through the warehouse with me. He asked technical questions. Complicated ones. I answered every single one. As we walked back toward the office, he looked at Ethan. So, who's actually responsible for building this? Before I could answer, Ethan smiled. We've both been deeply involved. At the time, that answer didn't bother me. It sounded like teamwork. Looking back, it was the first time he quietly blurred the truth. The pilot exceeded every expectation. Inventory errors dropped. Shipping delays decreased. Labor costs improved. Frank loved it. Then he introduced us to another distributor. Then another. Within 6 months, we had 9 paying customers. I finally resigned from my corporate job. It was one of the happiest days of my life. My boss shook my hand. "You've wanted this for years." "I have. I hope it works." "So do I." Walking out of that office, I felt free. For the first time since college. I wasn't building someone else's future. I was building my own. Or at least, I thought I was. Success changed Ethan faster than I expected. At first it was little things. He started taking meetings without me. Sales stuff, he'd say. "You'd be bored." Then he began introducing himself differently. "I'm the founder." Not, "We're the founders." I noticed. I just didn't say anything. One afternoon I joked about it. "You've been dropping the word we lately." He laughed. "You know clients. They like having one person to deal with." Made sense. I let it go. A week later, I discovered he'd hired a marketing agency without mentioning it. Another week after that, he rented a much larger office. Again. Without discussing it. When I asked why, he smiled. "We've got to look bigger than we are." Maybe he was right. But something about it felt different. Less like partnership. More like permission I was expected to give after the decision had already been made. Emily noticed the change before I admitted it. "You're quiet." "I'm just tired." "No." She looked at me across the dinner table. "You're worried." I pushed food around my plate. "I think Ethan's changing." She didn't seem surprised. "How?" "I can't explain it." "You don't have to." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Just promise me you'll start paying attention." That night, after everyone was asleep, I opened our shared company folder to prepare for a meeting. Several financial files I'd created were gone. Not deleted. Moved. Into a new folder I didn't recognize. It required administrator access. Access I suddenly didn't have. I stared at the screen for a long time before picking up my phone. I almost called Ethan. Instead, I closed the laptop. Because for the first time in 25 years, I realized I wasn't afraid of hearing the answer. I was afraid I already knew it. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I kept replaying one simple question. Why would my own company lock me out of financial files? By 6 the next morning, I was back at my desk with a cup of coffee that had already gone cold. I tried logging in again. Same message. Access denied. I refreshed the page. Nothing. I checked another folder. Still fine. Then another. Only certain files were restricted. Ownership records. Investor documents. Financial statements. Board meeting notes. The files that act to. Ally determined who controlled the business. That wasn't an accident. I called Ethan around 8. He answered on the second ring. "Morning, brother." His voice sounded cheerful. Too cheerful. "Morning. I can't get into some of the company folders." "Oh." A pause. I changed some permissions. "Why?" "You've been spending most of your time on development. I'm handling the financial side now. So I don't need access." "Don't take it personally. I'm just organizing things." The answer came too quickly. Like he'd rehearsed it. "You could have mentioned it." "I was going to." "When?" Another pause. "We've both been busy." Then he laughed. "Come on, Danny. You trust me, don't you?" That sentence hit me harder than it should have. Because people who deserve your trust rarely ask for it. For the next few weeks, I convinced myself I was overreacting. Startups are messy. Roles change. People wear different hats. That's normal. At least that's what I kept telling myself. Then something else happened. One of our developers accidentally copied me on an email. It wasn't even meant for me. The subject line read, "Founder approval required." Only one name appeared underneath. Ethan Brooks. Mine wasn't anywhere on the thread. I called Raj. "You got a minute?" "Sure." "You've been getting emails like that?" He hesitated. "Yeah." "Since when?" "I don't know. A couple months." "Why? What exactly has Ethan been telling everyone?" Silence. Long enough to make my stomach tighten. "I thought you knew." "Knew what?" Raj sighed. He introduced himself as the majority owner. I felt the room spin. "The what?" "The majority owner. I assumed you two had restructured." "We never discussed anything like that." Raj stopped talking. Neither of us said a word for nearly 15 seconds. Finally he spoke quietly. "Danny, I think you should talk to a lawyer." I didn't. Not immediately. Because once you hire a lawyer, you're admitting something is seriously wrong. And I wasn't ready to admit that. Instead, I drove to the office. Ethan wasn't there yet. Neither was anyone from sales. I walked into the conference room. On the table sat several printed folders. One of them had my name written across the top. I shouldn't have opened it. But I did. Inside were copies of documents I'd never seen before. Operating agreements. Corporate resolutions. Meeting minutes. There was even a page stating I had voluntarily reduced my ownership percentage after mutual discussions. My signature appeared at the bottom. I stared at it. It looked almost right. Almost. Whoever copied it had done an incredible job. But it wasn't mine. There was one tiny difference. I always looped the letter D in Daniel. This signature didn't. Most people would never notice. I did. Because I'd been signing my name for 43 years. "Danny?" I slammed T. He folder shut. Ethan walked into the room carrying 2 coffees. "You're early." "So are you." He smiled. "You want one?" I looked down at the folder. "What's this?" His smile didn't disappear. "Our paperwork." "I've never seen these." "You probably forgot." I didn't forget. He shrugged. "We signed a lot of documents." "No." I pushed the folder toward him. "We never signed this." His face remained completely calm. "You're stressed. I think you're remembering things differently." That sentence. I still remember it word for word. Not because of what he said. Because of how effortlessly he said it. As though making me question my own memory was easier than telling the truth. For the first time in 25 years. We argued. Not loudly. Quietly. Which somehow hurt more. I built the platform. We built it. I created the system. You couldn't have sold it. I'm not talking about sales. And I'm not talking about coding. He folded his arms. Businesses evolve. So do ownership structures. When did mine evolve? He sighed dramatically. This is exactly why I didn't want this conversation. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. He was acting inconvenienced. As though I were creating unnecessary drama. "I want copies of every corporate document." "You'll get them." "When?" "Soon. I'll have legal send everything." "Legal?" "We didn't even have in-house legal." "Since when?" Emily didn't interrupt while I explained everything. She simply listened. Every detail. Every conversation. Every strange decision. When I finally stopped talking, she asked only one question. "Did you ever sign anything without reading it?" "I don't think so." You don't think. Or you know. I closed my eyes. Then I remembered. Almost a year earlier, Ethan had rushed into my garage carrying a stack of papers. We need signatures. What are they? Bank authorization. Insurance. Boring administrative stuff. We'd been preparing for a client presentation. I was distracted. He flipped through pages. Pointed where to sign. I signed. Without reading everything. Because I trusted him. Emily didn't say "I told you so." She didn't have to. The disappointment on her face hurt enough. The next morning we hired an attorney. His name was Michael Rosen. Gray hair. Calm voice. 40 years of business litigation. He let me finish the entire story before speaking. Then he asked, "Do you still have your original notes?" "What notes?" "Anything. Design sketches. Emails. Early drafts. Development timelines." I saved everything. He smiled. Good. Never underestimate someone who keeps records. For nearly 3 weeks, Michael's office collected evidence. Old emails. Text messages. Cloud backups. Invoices. Prototype files. Version histories. Bank transfers. Slack conversations. Every tiny digital footprint. One afternoon he called. "I think we've got something." I drove straight over. He laid several printed documents across the table. "Look at the dates." I did. Then looked again. The operating agreement claiming I'd reduced my ownership had supposedly been signed 3 days before the company even opened its bank account. That made no sense. Another document referenced a client who hadn't become our customer until 5 months later. The paperwork contradicted itself. Badly. Michael leaned back. "People who commit fraud usually make one mistake." "What's that?" "They eventually believe they're smarter than everyone else." Meanwhile, business kept growing. At least from the outside. Ethan appeared everywhere. LinkedIn interviews. Podcasts. Local business magazines. Every article called him the founder. Not once did anyone mention me. Friends started sending links. "Danny, your company is everywhere." I stopped correcting them. It hurt too much. Then came the board meeting. Only I wasn't invited. I found out because our office manager accidentally mentioned it. "See you Thursday." "For what?" "The investor presentation." "What presentation?" Her smile disappeared. "Oh. I thought." She stopped herself. I already knew. Nobody had planned on telling me. Michael filed an emergency request demanding access to every corporate record. 2 days later, Ethan finally responded. Through his attorney. Not with an explanation. Not with an apology. With accusations. According to the letter, I had become emotionally unstable. I had contributed very little to the business. I had voluntarily stepped away from leadership. I allegedly posed a risk to future investors. Reading those words physically made me sick. Not because strangers believed them. Because someone I'd loved like family had written them. The hearing wasn't dramatic. No shouting. No surprise witnesses. Just lawyers. Documents. Facts. The judge ordered temporary disclosure of all company records while ownership was investigated. For the first time, we saw everything. Salaries. Bonuses. Stock allocations. Expense reports. That's when another surprise surfaced. Ethan had quietly been paying himself almost 3 times more than me for over 7 months. He'd also issued himself additional ownership units. Without my approval. Without board authorization. Without legal authority. Michael simply looked at me. I think this case just changed. The next month became exhausting. Depositions. Interviews. Forensic accountants. Document examiners. Every day brought another revelation. The deeper investigators dug, the uglier things became. It wasn't just me. Several early contractors had never received promised equity. One consultant had been pressured into rewriting meeting notes. Another employee admitted Ethan frequently told staff, "Daniel's just the technical guy. I'm the one running this company." Little by little, the image he'd built started cracking. Then, one Friday afternoon, something happened that none of us expected. Michael called. His voice sounded different. Excited. "I need you to come in. Now. Right now." 20 minutes later I was sitting across from him. He slid a business card across the desk. I looked down. The logo belonged to Northbridge Distribution, one of the largest logistics companies in the Midwest. I recognized the name immediately. They were easily Ethan's biggest client. "What about them?" Michael smiled. "They've been trying to reach you. I've never spoken to them." "I know. They thought Ethan was you." I frowned. "What?" "They want to discuss something." "What?" Michael leaned forward. "Their operations director says they have serious concerns." "About what?" He looked directly into my eyes. "They're beginning to suspect the software wasn't actually built by Ethan." I felt my pulse quicken. Michael pushed the phone toward me. "It might be the most important conversation of your life." My hand hovered over the receiver. I had no idea that one phone call was about to uncover a secret Ethan had managed to hide from everyone, including his own biggest client. I stared at the business card for several seconds before I finally picked up the phone. The name printed beneath the company logo read, "Laura Mitchell, Vice President of Operations, Northbridge Distribution." Michael nodded. "Take your time." I dialed. She answered on the first ring. "Laura Mitchell. Hi, this is Daniel Carter." There was a brief silence. Then she said something I wasn't expecting. "Oh, thank goodness." Not, "Hello." Not, "Nice to meet you." Just, "Thank goodness." She asked if we could meet the following morning. Not over Zoom. Not over the phone. In person. "We have something we need to show you." I agreed. That night, I barely slept. I wasn't thinking about winning a lawsuit anymore. I was thinking about one question. Why would Ethan's biggest client want to meet me instead of him? Northbridge's headquarters sat just outside Cincinnati. A modern glass building surrounded by distribution warehouses stretching farther than I could see. Laura greeted me herself. She looked to be in her early 50s. Professional. Direct. The kind of executive who didn't waste words. She shook my hand. "I've wanted to meet you for months." I frowned. "I think there's been a misunderstanding." "There has." She led me into a conference room. 2 other executives were already waiting, along with a projector. Laura closed the door. "I'm going to ask you something." "Okay." "When your company demonstrated the warehouse optimization platform to us last year, who answered all the technical questions?" "I did." "And who actually designed the forecasting engine?" "I did." "The routing algorithm?" "I did." "The inventory prediction model?" "I built every version." The 3 executives exchanged glances. Laura slowly nodded. "That's what we thought." She opened her laptop. "I need you to see something." A recording appeared on the screen. It was one of Ethan's recent investor presentations. He stood confidently on stage. After years of personally developing the predictive inventory engine. I froze. Laura paused the video. "You didn't write that speech?" "No." He says he personally created the software. He didn't. She hit play again. Our proprietary optimization model was designed from my operational experience. My stomach tightened. Every sentence was another lie. He wasn't exaggerating. He was rewriting history. Laura folded her hands. We've had concerns for months. What kind of concerns? Ethan couldn't answer basic technical questions. I looked up. What? He kept postponing meetings whenever discussions became too detailed. Another executive spoke. We assumed he was busy. Laura continued. Eventually we requested a system modification. I never heard about it. I know. We were told our request was impossible. It wasn't. She slid a document across the table. I looked down. It described a feature. I smiled immediately. This would only take 2 weeks. Laura smiled back. That's exactly what we suspected. Then she told me something that completely changed the case. We've been recording implementation meetings for compliance. I blinked. Every meeting? Every one. She opened another folder. Inside were transcripts. Emails. Meeting notes. Video timestamps. Every time Ethan claimed he had created the software. Every time he avoided technical questions. Every time he redirected discussions. Everything. Recorded. Documented. Date stamped. I looked at Michael. He didn't say a word. He simply smiled. The lawsuit suddenly became much bigger. It was no longer just about ownership. Now it involved false representations made to clients and investors. Northbridge voluntarily turned over everything they had. The evidence was devastating. Not because there was one dramatic moment. Because there were hundreds of small ones. Every exaggerated claim. Every misleading presentation. Every email. Every recording. Individually, they looked harmless. Together, they painted a very different picture. Discovery lasted another 3 months. During that time, something interesting happened. Employees started contacting me. Quietly. Privately. One after another. I don't think Ethan told you. He asked us not to include you. He changed your title. He removed your name from company presentations. He told investors you were leaving. I realized something painful. The betrayal hadn't happened overnight. It had been happening for nearly a year. I had simply trusted the wrong person long enough not to notice. One after noon, Raj called. I need to apologize. For what? I should have spoken sooner. It wasn't your responsibility. I knew something wasn't right. You weren't sure. No. I was afraid. So was I. That conversation stayed with me. Good people sometimes stay silent. Not because they're dishonest. Because they convince themselves someone else will speak first. About 6 weeks before trial, Ethan requested mediation. Michael looked at me. You don't have to agree. I'll go. Not because I wanted peace. Because I wanted answers. It was the first time we'd been in the same room in almost 7 months. He looked different. Heavier. Tired. His expensive confidence had started to crack. For several minutes neither of us spoke. Finally, he sighed. I never wanted it to end like this. I looked at him. When exactly did you decide I wasn't part of the company anymore? He rubbed his forehead. It wasn't like that. It looks exactly like that. We needed investors. So? They wanted one face. I almost laughed. So you erased mine? It was easier. Easier? You were the technical guy. I'm not good with people. I stared at him. 25 years of friendship. Reduced to a marketing decision. Then he said the sentence that ended any possibility of reconciliation. "I honestly believed you'd understand." I felt something inside me become very quiet. Not anger. Not sadness. Acceptance. Because people reveal who they are most clearly when they're defending the worst thing they've ever done. "I would have shared everything with you." He looked down. "I know. But you didn't." "No." It was the first honest answer he'd given me in months. Mediation failed. The trial moved forward. Fortunately, it never lasted as long as expected. The documentary evidence was overwhelming. Forensic examiners confirmed that several corporate records had been altered after the fact. The signature experts testified that the disputed ownership documents contained copied signature elements inconsistent with my genuine handwriting. Version histories from cloud servers showed that core architectural documents originated from my accounts months before the company was officially formed. The recordings from Northbridge demonstrated that Ethan repeatedly claimed authorship of technology he could not adequately explain. By the end of the proceedings, the facts spoke louder than either lawyer ever could. The final settlement wasn't announced with dramatic music or television cameras. It arrived in a conference room filled with paperwork. The terms were straightforward. My ownership interest was fully restored. The altered equity issuances were voided. I received substantial financial compensation for lost income and dilution. Independent governance was imposed until the company stabilized. Several investors removed Ethan from executive leadership as a condition of continuing their funding. He remained a shareholder for a short time. But he was no longer in control. Ironically, the company he tried so hard to own alone became the one place where he no longer had authority. Northbridge made another decision. One I never expected. Laura called again. "We'd like to continue working together." I smiled. "With the company?" She paused. "With you." Several months later, after careful negotiation, I accepted a role leading product innovation for a newly formed technology division backed by Northbridge and several former clients. Not because I wanted revenge. Because I finally had the chance to build software without wondering whether the person sitting across the table was quietly taking notes for the wrong reasons. About a year later, I ran into Ethan by accident. A neighborhood coffee shop. He was sitting alone. Older somehow. We made eye contact. He walked over. "I heard things are going well." "They are. I'm glad." I believed he meant it. Then he looked out the window. "I traded a lifelong friend for control." He gave a tired smile. "And I lost both." There wasn't anything left to say. I wished him well. Then I left. Not because I'd forgiven everything, but because carrying bitterness had become heavier than carrying the memory. People often ask me what hurt the most. It wasn't losing money. It wasn't the lawsuit. It wasn't even being pushed out of my own company. It was realizing that while I had spent years protecting our friendship, Ethan had been quietly protecting only his ambition. Trust doesn't disappear all at once. It fades through tiny compromises. A title changed here. A meeting excluded there. A document you never question because it's handed to you by someone you've loved for decades. If there's one lesson I learned, it's this. Friendship should never replace accountability. If you're building a business with someone, even someone you consider family, put everything in writing, ask uncomfortable questions, and never confuse loyalty with blind trust. Those habits don't destroy good relationships. They protect them. And if someone objects to transparency, you've probably learned something important before it costs you everything. Thank you for staying with me through this story. If it made you think, I'd love to hear your perspective in the comments. Have you ever trusted someone who slowly changed once success arrived? If you enjoyed this story, please like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more realistic karma and betrayal stories. Until next time, take care of yourself, and protect both your dreams and the people you choose to build them with.